The world needs more fathers with the qualities and values.
Hard work, honesty, and dedication and time. Takes a lot of time to be a parent.
Welcome to this edition of the Whole Truth Podcast. Today for Father's Day, I thought it'd be pretty cool to get my dad in here and get him behind the camera and make him a little uncomfortable and just kind of chat it up about life and being a dad and just kind of what struggles, what childhood, created the man that he is, and just, talk about being a grandpa and that kind of stuff. So, it's my dad. I'll let him introduce himself, and then we'll just kind of chat about life. So I know I'm the favorite, but you got some other kids you should probably mention here. So we'll let you do that.
I'm Phil Hoel, and I got 5 kids. Pretty proud of all 5 of them. Angela and Curtis, and of course Bob, and then Zach and Matthew.
So Matthew, youngest baby, he's over in Liberty area, works at a fertilizer place. I always forget what the hell the name is because it's Keystone now, right?
Yeah.
So they've changed names a couple times. Zach is here in Glenwood and works for Griffey Farms, helps dad feed cattle and whatnot. Kurt is a firefighter EMS down in Hopkinsville, Kentucky area. And then Angie is in the Greensburg area and working for the state in environmental. So I guess kind of the reason I had this is I just kind of feel like I just want to tell my story of that, and I want to keep it as positive as possible. But as fathers, the different struggles we went through, and, I guess I think you should probably start with my grandpa, your dad, what happened to him when you were in the first grade, and what that 40 years of his life after that accident was.
Yeah, my dad was in a tractor accident. Tractor turned upside down on him, paralyzed him from waist down. They said he'd never walk, but he walked, and he was a big impact on my life. Of course, then the time I was 11 years old, my older brother moved out, and I had to take over taking care of the livestock. So I've been taking care of cattle for a long time.
So what, you were in the first grade when that happened to Grandpa?
Yes. Yeah, first grade.
So what is the first grade? Is that like 8 years old? What is Red's in the third grade? He's turned 10. So, yeah, first grade, second grade. So Grandpa, so how old was Grandpa been when that accident happened? He's been in his 40s, right?
Yeah, he's been in his early 40s.
Did he live 41 years after the accident when they said he lived 6 months?
Well, no, they told us in 81 he didn't have long to live because medicine's no longer working. Then he lived till 04.
Okay. Yeah, because I was in high school. Yeah, the spring of 04. Yeah. You sure it wasn't 03?
No, it was 04.
Okay. I thought I was a sophomore, but anyways. So, I mean, like, and it's kind of funny that we say that about the medicine and everything because here at the office, we've been working with a lady that we're actually going to have on a podcast coming up soon. That's a nurse practitioner and talk about, how Grandpa threw a lot of the medicines away and just read up on his vitamins and took vitamins. And that was
81. They told him he didn't have long to live because medicine's no longer working. He threw them all away and started on vitamins.
So 45 years ago, I mean, let's just be honest, as corrupt as our pharmaceutical industry is these days, like, to think how much better it was 45 years ago. So kind of tell your story of back surgeries, farming, which forced you out of farming into environmental. And then, so a little backstory is Dad grew up in Camden, Ohio area, and then we moved over here when I was in the third grade to Indiana in 96, correct?
Yeah.
And so that's why Rushville's home for me. So tell that backstory of like the farming, the back surgeries, and what, kind of some of them steps in life and what led you to Indiana.
I farmed for years and then got married in 81 to Bob's mom. And then in 85, October 85, I had a first back surgery. And then 2 years later, had my second back surgery. And the doctor told me I either had to find something else to do or I'd end up in a wheelchair. And so I went to college, got a surveying degree, surveyed for a couple of years, and seen that it was famine and feast. And even though it's hard to spend time with the kids, I couldn't, that was really hard. So I went back to college and got the environmental degree, then worked, ended up getting into construction and construction inspector. So that's been doing ever since.
So since he won't say it, he ended up getting a job with the state of Indiana with DNR back in '96, and moved over. And I do remember that he came to us kids and just was explaining where he wanted to go. And I do know that you had asked a lot of questions, and Rush County was very well known for their FFA program. 4-H and FFA is a big part of us kids growing up. You knew the importance of that, so that's kind of how we landed in Rushville, or in Glenwood, but Rush County.
Yeah, it was kind of the center of the area. I was Division of Soil Conservation and Stormwater Specialist and dealt with erosion control on construction sites, and Rush County happened to be in the center, pretty well center of the area I had. Like I said, I checked and found out about like Bob said, the 4-H and FFA, because that's what I wanted my kids to be big in.
So one thing, if you know Dad, he's fed cattle since probably when he was in a diaper, and he's passed that gene on to me, and probably the worst part is he's passed it on to my 3 kids. So I guess like kind of talk like what you seen 4-H and FFA do for us kids growing up.
It just, my thing is growing up, I had cattle. We didn't have nothing fancy because I didn't have the money to do that, but kept so the kids, keep the kids busy and give them something to do. And I'd get as good a cattle as I could for them to show at the fair. And, just to teach them responsibility, it teaches them work ethic.
All right, now some questions here. So what was your biggest fear being a single dad? So I'll go ahead and say this. I said I'm going to keep this positive, but my biological mother left when I was 2. I'd have been 2. Kurt would have been 3 pretty much, and Angie would have been 8-ish. In college, back surgeries, bankrupt. Let's just be honest. Let's just put it all out there. Like, I always want to tell stories and like of the overcoming, and because it's Father's Day weekend. Dads are not celebrated enough, and good moms are needed too. Very fortunate of some people that stepped up in my life, but like. To step back, and it's kind of ironic because I've got a young man I just hired a couple weeks ago. I haven't even got to share this with you. His dad's raised him. And I made a comment the other day about me not having a mom, and that sometimes they think the dads are just the devils. And I kind of knew his story, but he's like, yep, you ain't saying anything new. And I'm like, oh, I was like, I'm sorry if I touched a nerve. He's like, no, you're right. So I guess like take us through some of that. Like what was the fear? And, because I also know that when we moved to Indiana that my aunt Jenny and Uncle Charlie, and there's a story there that, my aunt got cancer about the same time that you were going through a lot of this, and she ended up helping. She was there a lot to help us because she was home, but I also know that hurt her feelings, and, because you were moving us kids away from her. But, talk about like why you did that because I mean, that's my entire story. Like, if you hadn't moved over here, I wouldn't have met Emily. I wouldn't have had my kids. We wouldn't have this business, all that kind of stuff. So I kind of like to look at how God's weaved different trials into where we're at right now.
Well, when I got out of college, got a job with Hamilton County Soil Water District, and actually went to a seminar in Batesville, or a field day, and got introduced to a guy named Mark Goldsmith that worked for DNR, and we talked for a little bit, and he says, of course, I lived in Ohio, and he says, you want to work in Indiana? And, he said he'd be covering several counties and be doing the same thing you're doing there in Hamilton County. And so I told him I was interested. So then he sent me a notice when the job was posted, and I applied for it, and then come over and interviewed it, and decided it was a pretty good pay raise, but get my kids out in the country, and that's, keep them out in the country was a big thing. I had a lot of help from my sisters. I had 3 sisters, but mainly Jenny was the most, and then with my second wife was made the biggest impact as me as a father, making me a lot better father in the years when these guys were young.
So what advice would you give, a single dad, that maybe has 2 or 3 young kids, right now?
You're only as good as the resources you got. And I always tried, you can't do it yourself. You got to have people helping you. And the better people you got helping you, that's why my kids are the way they are, I feel. It's because of the resources, the people that I dealt with and worked with. It helped me out.
I mean, there's a lot of truth to that, who you put your kids around, and if it's FFA or 4-H or sports, like give them some responsibilities, because that's what kids need.
Phil Mitchell as well as Carl Hilton, both people that made big impacts on me, but they both told me the same thing. When they was Isaiah's principals, when they walked down the hall, kids that were in 4-H and FFA, you never had to worry about them. They was all good kids.
So Phil Mitchell, we lost him, didn't we?
Yeah.
He was a minister at the Glenwood United Methodist Church, and then Carl Hilton we lost several years ago, but he did livestock judging, drove around and rode on a lot of Saturdays when I was a kid, judging livestock. But it's kind of fun now being a dad with my kids, because Rhett and Reagan did the livestock judging contest at Beef Congress this year, and they were so excited because I told them I did it, so like they wanted to do it, and the poor kids had about 5 minutes of coaching from Trey Simmons about a week before of like roughly what to look at. Rhett's getting into 4-H last year, about this time, and it's funny because he just told me the other day, he's like, Dad, I'm gonna be so much better at Beef Congress this year because I actually know what I'm looking at. But it's like, what I think as kids you don't realize is the amount of volunteer hours that people put in. And if it's a Carl Hilton, or if it's a pasture, or if it's a Mr. Orm, like I get it, ag teachers are paid, but they're pretty much paid for 8 to 4, not 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. So it really does matter, who they're around. And another thing is, I think, and a lot of people I think are afraid to talk about it, but it's just challenges also really help develop people and kids, where, I had to do a lot of things on my own, like, with, I know how to cook, I know how to wash my own laundry, that kind of stuff, Thank God my wife's good at both of them, so I don't have to do it as much, but still, like, the value, the value in that. So yeah, absolutely. And, Uncle Charlie helped a lot, Aunt Jenny's husband, like, he was there. So, Yeah, absolutely.
Growing up, my dad was in the hospital a lot, and of course, I had to help take care of Dad, and I had to wash clothes, and if we wanted to eat, we had to learn how to cook, and so I taught my kids all that too.
So one thing that I will pay a huge compliment to my dad on is always, always, always at football games, basketball games. Hell, you chased me around when I coached youth football when I was getting out of high school into college, and I know you always said that your dad struggled getting to games because he was in a wheelchair, and it's been way more than 40 years ago now, 50 years ago, like it was harder to get out for people like that than it is today. So my kids notice that. They know, Grandpa's going to be at the fair to watch me show, right? And I look at them, I was like, what do you think? And they're like, yes, So I guess speak a little bit onto that. What made that so important to you?
Just spending time with your kids. That's, you got to support. I got a granddaughter that's a basketball player, and I like to go watch her play. It's, I get a lot of enjoyment watching them get out there and do their best. And it's very rewarding to me, You raise these kids and you hope to do the right thing, but then to see what their kids do, it's pretty awesome.
So what was a time when I was growing up that you wondered if I was going to turn out all right? Let's lighten this up a little bit.
Well, the day a farmer stopped me, and we hadn't lived here very long, he said, your boy come out and stopped me and bullshitted with me for a while. Stopped him on the road there and bullshitted me. So I know then, you had to bullshit and all down. And Debbie Turner told me one day that Bob can bullshit his way out of anything.
I mean, if we've seen my wife, I'm a pretty good sales guy here, guys. So, let's just call a spade a spade. So that was Sam Trebley, wasn't it?
I don't remember who
it was. I remember where he was parking the freaking halfway in the yard in the driveway. I'm dead. I know it was. Because Sam just lived just north of us there. So, or just, still is just north of you. So, that's
He just got that property just north of us.
Yeah. Well, he's got it just south of us, but he don't live that far north.
Right. North. Yeah.
That far north of us there. So yeah, let's talk grandkids, because I'm just going to be honest. Anybody watching this that knows you from 30 years ago, you were pretty damn hard on us kids. And my grandkids could pretty much do anything, or my kids, your grandkids could pretty much do anything and get away with it. So, I guess talk about qualities in your grandkids that you see in yourself or your kids.
Just work ethic, being responsible, communicating, and they learn from the best. They learn from their dad on their sneakiness sometimes. But
I won't throw Emily under the bus here, but they get more of that from their mother. But go ahead.
Poor Emily. And that's the whole key. It takes two to raise kids, and I ain't going to tell you I've done such a good job with me. It was the people that helped me, because you can't do it yourself. You just can't.
Like I said, Emily's phenomenal, so very, very, very fortunate there. So you didn't really give a good one of me, like, getting in trouble, which I don't really remember any ones that I thought you were going to, like, kill me or anything like that. So I was really hoping that you had one that maybe I'd forgot about. I mean, I'll tell on myself the time that
The time I went down to Kentucky, when I come back, you had George Brothers out because you turned the tractor over.
Davistown, yeah. George Brothers was Camden there, Dad, but yeah. That wasn't necessarily, I was just trying to be responsible and feed cows there. So I'll tell on myself the time that I remember shooting Kurt with a BB gun in the jaw. And I shot him from a pretty far distance, and it showed up in a dental x-ray like 4, 5, 6, 7 years later. And I do remember you saying, hey, what's this all about? So
yeah, I remember that now. Well, one time I was out feeding at the time, and we lived over in Ohio, and I come to the back door, there was a back porch, and I looked in the window, and you done something to Kurt. Or you did something to each other, and of course Kurt was Grandpa's favorite, and he went running into, you guys was always sneaking around.
Yeah, I was going to say that, you always tell the story that Grandpa started getting on my ass, and you said, whoa, 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 because Grandpa's confined to a freaking chair in the living room, so me and Kurt's wailing on each other in the kitchen. And you talking about being sneaky, Kurt runs off and jumps on Grandpa's lap, and it gets the innocent baby in trouble here, so.
Yeah.
What is your proudest moment as a father, either with me or my kids, I guess? I'll be selfish and we'll talk about me or my kids.
Well, the first thing I'm proud of all my kids is they all got college degrees and graduated. And about you is just the business you got and your kids the way they are. Man, they're good kids. And that's, I don't know, it means a lot to me to go and get their hugs.
Go ahead.
It used to be Rhett give me a hug, now it's Riley. Riley goes way out of her way to give me a hug all the time now.
So what I will say, the business is the phenomenal team that we've built around us. The people that's been here, Adam that's behind the camera, it'll be 4 years this fall. Nick, a little over 4 years. Chris, over 3 years now. Ellie, was Ellie before or after you, Adam? Okay, so Ellie's several years. So Ellie will be 3 years here. It just happened or getting ready to happen. But one thing that I remember, and anybody that knows my dad, he's always giving meat away. He's always got a freezer full of beef. My buddy Don Green tells me it all the time. Man, your dad always takes care of me. But I remember, and as a kid, you just remember certain things, and you don't really understand the whole entire scope. But I remember one of us kids had went down in the damn basement. We used to eat Cool Whip, like ice cream, back when it was probably 59, 69 cents a container. And me or Kurt, and we'll blame it on Kurt since he's not here, we had left the damn freezer open, and Dad went down there a couple of days later, and a lot of the meat, it wasn't spoiled, but it was thawed out. And we drove around. I remember as a kid, we drove around to the neighbors, and it's like, here, there's nothing wrong with this. Freezer door was open, but use this up. Use it tonight or tomorrow, put it in your refrigerator. And now I look back and I realize how poor we were at that time. And that was a lot of money in meat. And that had to be a lot harder than it looked like as a kid. But I guess I feel like it's passed on to me where it's the generosity is a core value around here. It's how me and Emily, we try to live our life every day. But, it's naturally in my blood. Speaking of Don Green, he had some heart issues last year, and we went and me and Emily and the kids went and split a bunch of firewood and took it to him. And anybody that knows Don knows that he don't want much help. He's a little prideful. Like any man that wants to provide for his family, but he was choked up multiple times and appreciative, of that. But what's fun is watching it in my son now. He sees it. He sees the generosity, and and he has no idea. He knows some of the stuff we do to be generous, but he doesn't fully understand it. So that stuck with me for, 30 years now. So I think that speaks volume as you as a dad, and I think we need that in the men in this country, to be generous and to give of your talents. Or my dad's you've got a talent of feeding cattle. You really enjoy it. It's what you put a lot of pride in.
Yep, I like that. buy the poor, skinny things and see what I can make out of them. And they don't always be a success, but most of the time they are.
So, I guess as we wrap this up, any words of advice, anything that I didn't bring up that, you think we should talk about?
Well, you just got to learn to love people, whether they like you or not, and turn the cheek. You got to turn the cheek. It takes a lot of hard work to raise kids. It takes a lot of hard work just to live nowadays. Honesty and hard work goes a long ways.
Well, as you say that, like that's actually how I was going to plan on ending this, because my dad said it my entire life. If you work hard and you be honest, he always told me you'll never have to worry about a job. And since I'm too stubborn to work for somebody, I've got to work for myself. I've just kind of added, a set of just honesty and hard work. Like you'll never have to worry about a job. Like, Zig Ziglar says, his quote is, if you help enough people, you don't have to ever worry about money, and, that's, that goes right in line with, work hard and, be honest. Because once again, I don't think there's anybody that could disagree that that's two values in this world that you can't hardly argue with. So, Dad, I appreciate it. I appreciate, I'm trying to raise 3 kids, do the best I can. And I know how hard it is with a wife, and not have to do it for years or part of your time by yourself. I don't know how in the hell I would do it. So, one thing that I've probably learned more in the last 3 to 4 years is I try to look back and just reflect and see where the hurt came from or the challenges came from, from whoever is struggling, and, I've said it, you were pretty hard on us kids in the grand scheme of things. Thankful you were, but, I just look back and realize how quick you had to grow up as a first grader, to help with the farm. And, you didn't give up on us kids when you could have thrown your hands up like Nancy did, and, you persevered, you pushed through, and, something else was the generosity, but was always caring too. Like another fun story about you is when we were coaching youth football, you were unemployed and struggling to make all the ends meet. And there was a young boy that was playing on our team that his mom freaking moved him to Shelbyville, and you burnt your gas to go pick him up for practice, bring him to Rushville, drive him back to Shelbyville, and then drive back, to Glenwood. So I just think we need more men that want to love their families, that do want to draw the line in the sand and say, come high, hell or water, like this is my responsibility. So I love you and I appreciate you.
Love you too.